It was a cold, dreary night when I first encountered the thing that would change my life forever. I had just moved into a small old house on the outskirts of town. It was one of those houses that seemed to have a history, a past that didn't quite want to let go. The kind of house that looked like it belonged in a horror movie. Creaky wooden floors, cracked windows, and a thick layer of dust in every corner. But it was cheap, and I was desperate. The night I arrived, the wind was howling, making the trees outside seem like dark figures swaying in the moonlight. The house looked darker than it usually did in the daylight, the old wooden beams groaning in the gusts. I remember standing at the door, my hand on the handle, a strange feeling creeping over me. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just the weather playing tricks on my mind. It was just a house, after all. The first night was quiet. The only sound was the soft hum of the wind and the occasional creaking of the house settling. The air felt thick and damp, and I pulled the blankets tighter around me as I lay in bed trying to sleep. But something didn't feel right. It wasn't the wind or the house itself. It was the way the shadows seemed to stretch just a little too far, the way the silence felt too heavy. I couldn't place it, but I knew something was off. I chalked it up to my imagination. A new place, a new environment. But the second night was different. I woke to the sound of something faint, footsteps, soft and deliberate. They were coming from upstairs. At first I thought it was just the house. Old houses make noises, but as I listened the steps grew louder, more distinct. They weren't the usual creaks of the house settling. These were footsteps. Someone or something was walking above me. My heart raced, and I lay there in the dark, frozen with fear. I tried to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but deep down I knew it wasn't. The footsteps continued, slow and methodical, as if whatever was up there was deliberately walking around, circling the rooms. And then the door creaked open. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. The air felt colder. It was as if the room had frozen over. The footsteps stopped, and there was nothing but silence. My ears rang, and my mind raced. There was no one else in the house. At least, no one I could see. The place was mine, and mine alone. The silence stretched on unbearable, until I could take it no longer. I forced myself out of bed, heart pounding in my chest, and crept toward the stairs. My footsteps were muffled, but every sound felt amplified in the eerie stillness of the house. I reached the bottom of the stairs, but there was no movement, no sound, just darkness above. I had to know what was happening, so I forced myself to climb the stairs, my body trembling with each step. As I reached the top, I heard it again, a soft, faint scratching like fingernails dragging across wood. It was coming from the attic. I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, staring at the attic door. There was no way I was going up there, not alone, not in the dead of night. But then the scratching stopped, and with it came a low, guttural whisper. It wasn't a voice that could belong to any human being. It was something darker, something ancient, and it was calling my name. The door creaked, the whispers growing louder, and in a sudden panic, I turned and fled down the stairs, my heart racing. The house seemed to close in around me. I slammed the door to my bedroom shut and locked it, hoping the safety of the walls would protect me from whatever was haunting the house. The next morning I told myself it was just a bad dream. But the unease remained. I kept thinking about that whisper, how it wasn't just in my head. I knew what I had heard. There was something in the house. Something that wasn't human. Over the next few days, the noises became a regular occurrence. I could hear them every night, footsteps pacing back and forth, muffled whispers that seemed to echo through the walls, the scratching coming from the attic. But there was something more disturbing, something I couldn't ignore. The shadows. At night, they seemed to move on their own, slithering across the walls, growing and shrinking in unnatural ways. Every time I turned around, I could feel something, or someone, lurking just behind me, watching, waiting. One evening, after a long day of trying to ignore the growing fear in my chest, I decided I had had enough. I would go up to the attic. I had to face whatever it was that had been tormenting me. I grabbed a flashlight and made my way up the creaky stairs to the attic door. My hands shook as I reached for the knob, the cool metal cold under my fingers. When I opened the door, I was hit by a rush of stale, musty air. The The attic was dark, cluttered with old furniture and boxes, their surfaces coated in thick layers of dust. I stepped inside, my flashlight beam slicing through the dark, illuminating the forgotten items. But then I saw it, something moving in the corner. My heart skipped a beat. I froze, staring at the corner of the room. At first, it seemed like nothing, just a pile of old rags, maybe. But as I took a cautious step forward, the pile shifted, and I realized that it wasn't just cloth. It was a shape, a figure, hunched over, and it was staring at me. I couldn't breathe. The flashlight slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor, the beam casting wild shadows across the room. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The figure stood, slow and deliberate, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. It wasn't human. It was tall and thin, its skin a mottled gray, stretched tight over its bones. Its eyes were hollow, black pits that seemed to absorb all the light in the room. The figure didn't move toward me. Instead, it simply watched. And then it spoke, not in words, but in a low, rasping voice that crawled into my mind, filling my thoughts with terror. It whispered my name again, and I knew in that moment that it was never going to leave me. I turned and ran, stumbling down the stairs and out of the attic, slamming the door behind me. But the whispering didn't stop. It followed me. It filled every corner of the house, echoing through the walls, through the floors, through the very air I breathed. I tried to leave. I packed my things and rushed to the door, but when I reached for the handle, it wouldn't open. I pulled and tugged, but it was as if the house itself was holding me prisoner. The whispers grew louder, more urgent, until they became screams, filling the air with their deafening sound. Desperate, I turned and ran through the house, but no matter where I went, I couldn't escape it. The whispers followed me. The figure watched me from the shadows, its hollow eyes never leaving me. I was trapped, and I knew then that I would never leave this house. Not alive, anyway. I don't know how long I was trapped there. Days, maybe weeks. The house became my prison. It changed. The walls seemed to breathe. The air grew colder, thicker, and the figure, it never left. It was always there, watching me from the corners, waiting for me to slip up. One morning I woke to find the house silent. Too silent. I thought maybe, just maybe, it was over. But when I looked out the window, I saw it again. The figure, standing at the edge of the yard just outside the light of the porch. And I knew then that it wasn't over. It had never been over. The house had claimed me, and whatever it was that had been watching me, whatever had been following me, it would never let me go. So, if you ever find yourself near a house on the outskirts of town, one that looks like it belongs in a nightmare, I beg you, don't go inside. You might think it's just an old, abandoned place. But trust me, there's something in there. Something that's been waiting a long time for someone like you, and it won't stop until it's had you.